Hi, everybody, and welcome, and thanks so much for joining today. So I'm Eva, the manager of the customer engagement team here at Oak, and I will be your host today. We've got a brilliant panel eagerly waiting in the wings, and honestly, this is going to be one of those topics which I think everyone in the room is going to have an opinion on, whether they're kind of ready to admit it or not. So just a couple of reminders before we jump in. Today's session is being recorded, so if you need to drop off early or if you want to revisit anything afterwards, we'll send the recording out to everyone who is registered. Now, we love hearing from you, so do please say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from and share any thoughts during the webinar, along with any questions that you might have for our panelists too. So, when we think about AI, it's kind of everywhere right now. And if you're working in internal comms or HR, you've probably felt that pressure to have an answer for it, whether that's a question from leadership about what you're doing with AI, or employees wondering what does it mean for their jobs. And the data is telling a pretty interesting story, really. According to the IOIC IC index, only 36% of employees say their leaders have clearly explained how AI will be used in their organization. And then just 35% believe it's being used to solve the right problems. So we've got this situation where AI adoption is accelerating, but employee trust really isn't keeping up. And something else that we found in our own comms confessional campaign is that a lot of people are using AI far more than perhaps they'd like to admit. Holding up my hand for that one. There's kind of like a quiet embarrassment around it. And it tells us something really important about where people are at with this right now. So today, we're going to talk about all of that, the trust gap, what genuine AI adoption actually looks like, versus the performative version, and how communicators can use AI to do more of the work that actually matters. Now, I'm really excited to have two brilliant guests with me today to dig into this properly. So let me hand over to them to introduce themselves. Let me bring them in. And Jen, I would like to come to you first, please, if that's okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Eva, and thanks so much for having me. So yes, I'm Jen Sproul, and I'm Chief Executive of the Institute of Internal Communication. And for those of you who don't know who we are, so we are the Professional Association for Internal Communication. And so our job is around advocating for the practice and also helping the practice look at what are the things that we can be doing to help drive goals and success for our organisations.
Perfect. Dave?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Dave Ferguson. I'm a Chief Product and Technology Officer at Oak, and so I've been lucky enough to be with the company for 16 years now, and I've seen a lot of transformations in the internal comm space. I think AI is probably one of the biggest for a generation at least, so I'm looking forward to having this conversation today.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Let's dive in then, shall we, to our panel discussion and get started with some of our questions that we have here. So, Jen, I'm going to come to you first on this one. With only 36% of employees agree that leaders have clearly explained how AI will be used in their organisation, and only half of employees actually trust their leaders. Why is trust becoming the defining factor in successful AI adoption? What happens when that trust is missing?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Eva. And I think that, you know, with the pace of things that are happening, and particularly around AI, and particularly around organizations wanting to be competitive, to move forward, to find efficiency or gains or optimization, and in a world where I think the technology came before our understanding of its implications as well, has made that more challenging. But before you get to the change and the adoption part, trust is the fundamental thing that makes the human argument of why should I follow you, why should I do what you're saying, and why should I buy into it and go with it. It's for me, it's also something that should sit very much strongly on a sort of board governance framework when you're thinking about risk mitigation in terms of when you're entering into these projects, because fundamentally trust is the foundation for taking people with you. It's, you know, and we are, I think, generally going through also alongside the AI revolution, a sort of socio-cultural revolution where trust and leadership and people in power is also under question. So you've got this kind of multitude event, which is sort of affecting, I guess, the psychological or the well-being or the intent or the understanding or the motivation to go, I'll follow you, I'll do what you're saying, I'll go with you, and I'll make this change. Because it is about at that top going, do I believe the clarity of purpose? Do I believe in the mission? Do I believe that what you're saying against what is done is something that, yes, if I follow you and I follow into this AI adoption, you are going to listen to me, protect me, and I can believe it's for the greater good. And I think trust has been hinging for a long time, even before AI. So it's not something that AI has necessarily responsible for, but it's something that I think that we haven't given enough time to. And before you're looking at AI adoptions, to go, do people already feel trust towards my leadership? Do I feel sentimentally engaged and motivational around it? Is that going to play a huge barrier to AI adoption? I think we've got so fast at it, we haven't gone back to what are the psychological or barriers to people believing it. Because, like I say, I think they're also going through this socio sort of cultural time where we don't believe in people in power, but also there is a prevailing rhetoric and narrative going on in the media that AI means you will lose your job. So you're battling upstream towards that at any point. So therefore, when someone says, follow us, and they're like, should I trust you? But when you've said that before, and I've seen you do this over there, or that changing on here, I haven't felt your actions and your words and your values and your behavior are there for me to want to follow the words and do the things that you're asking me to. It hasn't created the mindset. It's not that I don't think that as workforces and as people, as humans, we're anti-change. We've been evolving and changing and adapting for decades. I think that at the moment, people are just very, very distrusting of really what's the intention behind it. Have you been clear with me? Can I see my role in it? And if that trust is already low, and then you put AI adoption on top of that, you are working massively upstream to get people with that, let alone from a compliance, governance, risk point of view. If you're looking at the psychological impact of how you get people to follow you and adapt with your organization, trust is the emotional contract that happens between what leader says and what you want me to do. And at the moment, trust in leaders, that as you said, is 50%. That's down 9 points in 1 year. And so that upstream is huge and it's vast. And I think that there are multiple factors driving into it. And I think it highlights to me as well something fundamental that we need to look at. It isn't necessarily an AI problem, but a human problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it really has this ability to maybe exacerbate an existing problem that you have, and it brings it into the fore and makes it more obvious when you're asking people to come on this AI adoption journey with you.
Yeah.
Dave, I'd like to come to you as well from a product and technology perspective. What are you seeing that trust gap play out with the organizations that you've been working with, and what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Jen said. I think it's funny that I was going to say similar kind of thing, and that it's not a technology problem. I think these kind of issues have been around with any adoption of new technologies. It's more of a communication and a leadership issue and a communication issue, not necessarily a technology one. I think, for example, we've got 49% of leaders believe AI have become part of everyday work in their organization. Only 42% of employees agree with that. And you've got 60% of leaders think that employees are automating repetitive tasks on their day-to-day job, and yet only 36% of employees actually believe that. And then finally, you've got 23% of CEOs believe that we're already delegating entire tasks to AI, and yet only 8% of employees believe that that's true. So you've got leadership walking around thinking adoption is well underway, when on the ground it's not, and in reality it's not. So deployment in AI is racing ahead of trust. And I think what's telling as well is employees feel that when they're being communicated to or to being involved in a conversation about adopting new technology, they're far more likely to adopt it and trust it. So I think really the place where I see this most relevant is in the middle management kind of space. And I think Gallup's latest research on this actually is good, in that the strongest predictor of success in AI adoption is whether someone's direct manager actively champions it. And you're likely to get a 9 times more kind of experience of genuine AI transformation if your manager is actively championing AI, because they're the ones that are rolling AI out or asking you to adopt AI technology. It's generally coming from managers and leadership. So yeah, I think definitely not a technology problem, more of a cultural problem and a communication problem.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it always falls down to that expression of, you don't work for the company, you work for your boss. And it always comes down to your line manager's attitude towards things as to whether you're willing to go on that journey. If somebody's asking you to adopt AI, but they're putting it across to you in a really negative way, and you're thinking they're not bought into it, you're naturally, as you say, Dave, you're not going to buy in, are you? You're going to be like, I'm suspicious of that.
Well, especially with AI, because I think there's been so much hype. It feels like more than any technology before it, there's such a hype around it, and almost that in itself is causing some standoffish kind of distrust. And why is everyone so excited about this technology? What is it that it's going to do? What is it changing? What's going to happen with me and my role? I think they're natural questions for people to ask when there's so much hype around it. So that in itself, I think businesses need to take a step back and communicate the why to their employees and bring them on that journey. And I think you're more likely to get trust and buy-in at that point.
100%. So moving on, and actually this leads us in nicely to our next question. Jen, how do you feel that internal communicators can introduce AI initiatives in a way that builds and maintains that employee trust?
I think it picks up a lot on what Dave is saying as well. I think for me, if you look at the things, there was an iceberg analogy I saw years ago where sort of 4% of leaders know the real issues, as 100% of people actually know what's going on and what the problems are that need solving. And they have not been factored into that consultation, that ideation, that innovation. It's been, we should do it, then you four must do it. That's not good. That's not a good start point to get people to follow you and want to change the way they've done things. And we also are talking about the psychology of mindset change, of behavioral change, and it doesn't happen in an instant, but it also happens through involvement and participation and understanding where I am in it, where I'm not in it. What does it mean? Where does it go? So I think that for me, and I will say this a lot, I've spoken to a lot of organizations, and we've seen it bear through in the IC Index and other work that we're doing. Organizations have not had a clear AI narrative before they've begun the AI journey. Well, they have no narrative out there that says why they're doing it, to what commercial benefit, to what progress, to what market, to what role, to what vision, to what future, to what governance, to what compliance, to what processes. Going back to Dave's point, there has been no why and no benefit driven to, well, if I go with this, this is going to help my organization thrive better, for me to have confidence in it, to help me have confidence that my role is going to be part of that future organization. And actually, I can be part of how I use AI to innovate it. I mean, I went to a conference a few weeks ago with the Institute for the Future of Work, and you had a lot of the big leaders, government talking, those that are working on the AI task force for the mayor to think about what it does for jobs. And people, person after person on that platform said, AI is going to be great because it means we can all do the human work. But there has been no investment in what that means, how that changes people's roles, a lack of honesty. Actually, now you're seeing L&D, learning and development, upskilling being cut at pace. And there's no consideration for the ethical communication and the dilemmas that people are playing. They're going quickly do it and then having to go a few months later, so that department did this, so we've made the decision to cut this department by half. It's all that narrative, that guardrails, that vision. And I think that if you are going to set it out from the start point, get your ducks in a row and have a sense of that. And if you don't have the answers, don't let silence prevail. Fill in the gaps and involve people, make people feel part of it, but also show them the vision of where their career path is going to go, if there is one or if there isn't one, and give them the opportunities to upskill in those other areas. Like I say, someone said the other week, it's going to be great. And I don't disagree with this. The adoption of AI in medicine is making huge advancements. We all can see that just as citizens. And then it says, and that means that doctors can more human work, but are we doing that? How is that happening? Because that doesn't feel like the experience we're getting. So involve, have clear narrative, upfront the issues that you don't know, or the answers that you don't know, and the implications that you don't know. But also, if you want to position people and move people, show them a pathway to move with you, and give them the skills and give them the definition of where their opportunities lie and what that will mean for their role and what they will contribute. If you don't do all of that up front and set those guardrails and use the managers as a vehicle to that, because that's where the trust exists, as Dave says, 73% trust direct managers, and give them specific clarity in it and involvement in it, and make sure the governance is set out around it from a top point of view, then you're going to be forever reverse engineering, and you might get a short-term win, but the consequence for long-term implications on trust and resilience are going to be huge.
Yeah. I think having an honest conversation, isn't it? It's just being honest with people and taking on.
We're adults. Talk to us like adults.
Yeah. Don't sugarcoat it. Tell me how it really is going to be. Dave, what have you found effective in explaining AI-enabled changes to employees so they felt supported rather than monitored or replaced?
I think the one area that we're severely lacking in right now is AI training. It doesn't have to be expensive training that you send people on. I mean, some of the most successful kind of upskilling that I've seen is just having AI champions in an organization, like like an AI focus group or a working group, experts that people maybe have done. You always get the AI evangelists in an organization. There's always at least one. We've got a few where they're happy to go around and teach people what AI tools are, how to use them effectively. And I think so if people understand the technology more, then again, they're more likely to trust it and they're more likely to adopt it because they can see the tangible benefits. I think when AI first landed, even myself, when I first got ChatGPT, like, okay, so what do I ask it now? What do I type into this box? What can I do with it? And I think that's a big barrier to AI adoption as well, is how can it actually improve my job and make me more efficient or get my time saving back. But crucially, I think the key thing that I think we all agree with is keeping the humans visibly in the loop with whatever AI does, especially on things that touch people performance, people decisions, job roles. I think that there's a research that said 58% of employees don't trust AI to make unbiased decisions, and almost a quarter wouldn't trust it to make any workplace decisions at all. So I think being explicit about where humans are in the loop in any of the AI automated workflows, especially, I think is hugely important to kind of build that trust and maintain employee trust in an organization, for sure.
Yeah, and I can just add to that, so I think it's such a good point, David, on what you talked about on this upskilling side. And I think it's also about upskilling people in the mix about where do you use your critical judgment and your humanness to make sure what comes out great. Because everyone keeps saying, and I ask this a lot, people keep saying with AI, then there's more time for human work. What is the human work?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What do you want me to do with that? And how does that keep me protected? But I think that also as well, people aren't being trained or being left, or you're seeing that sort of slop of work happening where there isn't the chance for us to actually understand. So how do I critically work with it? How do I interrogate it? And I think that's also the other part of it, that it feels like if I'm not good at technology, I'm out, but also what is the humanness and the critical and the knowledge and the tacit ability that if you can apply it with AI could make you exceptional in the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think there's I think there's also an element of employees going underground a little bit because they're scared to admit they're using AI. Maybe it's because if they admit they're using AI, then it somehow puts their job at risk. And so I think if an organization is more open about AI and shows that they're actually accepting of it and they're wanting you to experiment with AI and use it in really creative ways to kind of help the organization as a whole, I think everyone benefits from that. And it's not well, you save some time back and you've saved enough time now that your role is no longer needed. I think that's such a bad way to look at it. But I think that's the narrative that's being played out, is that AI is being used as a cost-saving tool to you know what I mean? And that's such a bad way to look at the use of AI in an organization. But that's the narrative that's out there.
I guess it's difficult, and it all comes back to the communication, doesn't it, from the organization, and within your organization setting the scene to say AI it's here and it's here to stay, but how we are going to use it within an organization is that, we'll use it to enable you to spend less time doing admin tasks and enable you to spend more time with your customers and having those conversations, or it frees you up to have more time to have that strategic thinking space. And if you frame it and position it in a way that is, this is what we want you to use that time for, people would then feel safe and protected and be like, oh, okay, it's there to help me. It's not there to replace me. But if you're not getting all those communications and people are like, yeah, you need to use more AI, and if you're going to senior leadership team and going, I could really do with some extra resource, and the response is, well, can't you get AI to do some of that? And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Then you start to feel nervous, and it's all about the communication around it is so key in helping people trust that their jobs are safe, because ultimately we're all, everyone's a little bit nervous, aren't they? You're thinking, my goodness, am I going to get replaced? Am I going to lose my job? But how we communicate it within our organizations is key to helping and stabilizing that and building on that trust, so people do actually see it as a potential rather than a threat.
I think there's some good research by PwC actually that productivity increased by 40% in companies that are most exposed to AI compared to those that are least exposed. But in those companies that did, raised wages and headcount faster, not slower. So actually, if you reframe AI adoption and AI rollout as growth infrastructure rather than headcount replacement, then I think you're actually onto a more successful business, and from the research that's been done so far, at least.
That is interesting. Yeah, that's a really positive message, isn't it, for the use of AI?
I just think it's the opposite to what people think the kind of end goal of AI is. There's opportunity in the time saving.
Definitely. Let's bring this on to our next question. And Dave, I'm actually going to come to you first on this one. There's a lot of noise around AI right now. We've all seen the buzzwords. But where are you actually seeing genuine opportunities for communicators to save time and deliver real value?
Yeah, it's a good question, because AI has created quite a lot of noise. So I think that the value we're seeing at the minute falls into what I would say really three categories. Content creation, self-serve, employees being able to self-serve, and then analytics. So I think 75% of communicators are using AI to draft content, meeting notes and transcribing things. That's genuine measurable time back. I think content creation is the obvious one that we see. I think the more interesting one is in self-serving. So employees being able to self-serve questions about policies, benefits, past announcements. So things like AI search means that people can find answers themselves and instantly, without waiting for people to dig out the answer, which really gives a huge amount of time back to kind of communicators and takes that load off communicators' plate, or HR as well, because people reaching out, asking questions where the information's already there. We've already published this information. We've provided it. It's just people can't find it. And so if you think about an average employee's day as well. They're not just missing information, but organizations also have a multitude of different systems that they use that employees have to go to on a daily basis. I think there's something like 2 hours a day roughly is wasted through searching for information or trying to find the right tool to do a particular task. And so, which isn't really surprising when you look at how many systems organizations have. I think on average now, organizations have about 100 different software applications, which is just a crazy amount, which probably AI hasn't helped that, I don't think, either, because there's a multitude of new AI systems that have been introduced. So you've got a huge amount of frustration with employees trying to find information, trying to find the right tool, and AI can bring all that together. So AI has been crucial in unlocking information for employees now and finding the right information really quickly. It also taps you into the business systems and allows you to perform actions and get information through connected systems and bring all of those together into one really easy to use interface, which has been crucial. And then analytics is really where the real substance is. So being able to find the information you need, maybe it's curated into a format that presents the information in a really easy to consume way, but not just presenting raw facts, actually turning them into suggestions and actions so that you've got actionable insights that you can go and use to change content strategies or understand the usage of an application by your employees, or understand what the next topic needs to be because there's knowledge gaps in certain areas of the organization. So all of that being curated behind the scenes and then brought and presented in a way that's really easy to consume is huge for communicators as well. For me, though, the conversation is what can AI do? It's in what are you going to do with the time that you get back? So that's the thing that I don't think we're really taking advantage of as an industry very well at the minute. So banking time to be more strategic, which most of the profession isn't doing right now. I think nearly half of communicators say AI is maybe helping them to create more content, and only a third of them are redirecting that time into actual strategic planning. So there's a missed opportunity there because spotting a trend before it becomes a problem and deciding what actually needs saying in the next quarter is exactly the work that I would say most communicators say they don't have time. So if you're using AI to save time, then bank that time to something more strategic. And then we just talked about the middle manager gap and communicating about, you could use your time to communicate AI initiatives so you can build that trust, close the loop. If you can elevate trust in AI as well because of the time you saved, or just communicating to middle managers in general. I think there's a stat which 4% of communicators think their middle managers are good at communicating. So build the tools and give people or middle managers the information they need to communicate down to their employees. I think that's really a great use of that time back that AI gives you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think just that it's using the time effectively that you get back, isn't it? And if you're not investing that time back into having those strategic thinkings and conversations, then it makes it makes you question whether AI is actually helping you do what you need it to do. Jen, I've got the same question for you. What are some quick wins that you've seen?
Yeah, and I think Dave answered that question really well, and I would just build on a lot of what Dave said. Of course, obviously in the content production, etc., all has been highlighted. But I would step back as well, and I think this picks up on what Dave was saying as well, is that we need to be mindful that we don't need AI to generate more stuff, because I don't think we need more stuff.
100%.
And I think that we also have to tap into, and what I would say as well is, we are in an attention deficit crisis. You have 3 seconds or 10 minutes a day, or you're trying to get meaning and understanding and behavioral change and psychology and understand message and how it hits. Just thinking, well, if I use AI to send out more stuff, is that solving the fundamental issue that I'm trying to save? Or can I use it more smartly or more intelligently to focus on the right thing? So those people that are looking at AI as a tool to inform you and plan you and incite you and challenge you, not just enable you to, well, I can do more stuff. So I can go from 5 blogs to 10, or I can do more new. We need to tap into how people are working and what workflows look like and how organizations work. Going back to Dave's point about systems, for example, in the IC index, which is I don't necessarily think in internal communicators' place to do, but the one thing that people have, there's 5 contributing factors for confidence for the future of their organization, and one of which is systems and processes. That's the number one issue. So do you think then so I think that for me, genuine and great things is when we've used it to take a step back from our work, used it as an intelligence tool and an insight tool to make us really understand what do we need to do, and do we need to do it in that way. We can use it as those that are using it to analyze what's working, what isn't working, how can I actually improve workflow in my internal communication team? How can I take out things that make things feel too hard that should actually be more effective and don't need to be that hard? When you use your discernment to look at AI to go, well, if that actually is critical to the business, we need to do that, but actually I could workflow that in a different way, and I could employ agents that do things in a way that they become part of my team, but I understand the critical review that they need to keep things going. That means then I can start to look at things like the opportunities of AI around, and this is my big piece at the moment, is I think that as internal communicators, how do we become an internal intelligence unit of a business? And AI can help you process that intelligence at pace. We know trust is down, direct managers are critical, they're not feeling supported, there's a lack of connection, there's a lack of relationship, there's a lack of leadership trust. So how can I use AI as a tool to help me generate or process that feedback in a quick, smart way to address the queries and the issues quickly? So I can say to, hey, leader, before you go out and do that, I know from the insights, this means people are not feeling heard, they didn't get that message, that outcome didn't happen, that change hasn't been adopted. So we don't keep running at things that aren't working. We're providing it back in a more insightful, and AI can, as Dave said, you can feed it with the right information, the right data, the right skill, the right tool. It can give you that place of intelligence, and it can shift us into that interpreting. I've spoken to a few colleagues recently, and I asked them, what's the biggest thing that leaders want from you right now? What's the biggest thing that you're being challenged on, or they want more of you from? Not do they necessarily want more, they want better interpretation of data and insight to inform decision making. That can help us do that at pace, rather than just thinking we've got it, so let's send out more stuff. So I think that's the space we need to move into. And it's those that are seeing AI as that companion to that, but also are making sure that their people and their team, whether that's setting up agents to run things in the background, have the skills to critically analyze, interpret, inform, to help make better decisions in their organizations. And where AI has less risk for misinterpretation from processes, whether that's just your onboarding packs or the things that you do every day, how can I get that going in a more simplified workflow than we have currently? So I think it's those that are using it for the right things, but using it to up our intelligence game and our interpretation game and our critical thinking game, not using it to produce more stuff if it isn't what's needed.
I think that's a really good point. I think while people get used to AI and build agents to help them with their everyday, because it's quite a skill leap, I think people are probably just going to replicate the existing processes that already exist. I think, which is fine. I think that's not a bad place to start, because you've got to start somewhere. I think the next phase is exactly that. You've got to look at, actually, now that you've got this new capability, how can I reimagine how this whole thing works? Because you could gain, I'm sure you can gain so much more out of AI by not trying to replicate an existing manual process, for example. So I think that's a really good point. I think that's key to the future of building AI workflows.
And I also think I think the other thing I forgot to say as well is those that are looking at it from how does it drive that personalization agenda and that data intent agenda? So again, it's those that are stepping back and thinking, what am I feeding it, as well as what it's giving me back? And how do we use it to get cut through? And that was another thing I heard back from some senior internal communicators. Their leaders want them to help them cut through the noise, not add to the noise.
Well, it's funny because I would say 3, 4, 5 years ago, too much noise was what everyone was talking about, and cutting through the noise was back then. And I think we did a good job of starting to do that as an industry. And then the AI's come along, and it's like, now we can push comms faster. It's like, well, actually, hang on, slow down. Let's not add to the problem that we had 2 or 3 years ago. Let's do it a little better, because you can be maybe more targeting and more specific and better at comms rather than pushing more comms out. You can just provide better communication.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing I always say as well, going back to what you said and Eva said, is that remember, communication is the organisation.
True.
I moved our slides on there cheekily because you were already answering question 4 before I've asked it. So I put it on screen, but you were just, I didn't want to interrupt because the conversation was just naturally towards that. It's like, how can leaders ensure they're solving real business and employee challenges and not just chasing that technology, which, it's using AI to help you understand what you can do better rather than, like you're saying, creating more noise. I feel like you're absolutely right. And something when you have a light bulb moment halfway through a webinar and you think, hold on a minute, we really have just done that. We've gone, we need to do less but better was the thinking a few years ago. And then AI's come along and we've gone, oh goody, now we can do more. We've kind of forgotten that less is more, like quality over quantity. Pushing out more comms doesn't make people engage with it. In fact, all we really do is giving people this overwhelming sense of overwhelm because they're like, I don't know where to start. There's so much information you're throwing at me. I mean, are people sending smaller, shorter comms? Is the way that we need to be creating our content different now? I don't know. And how does AI play that part in that? There's probably another whole conversation to be had on there. But I guess from a leader's perspective, is there anything else that, Dave, you'd like to add?
I think if you add on top of that, people can tell when something's written with AI as well. I think we should remember that right now, at least, whether that's still going to be true in a year or two's time. So if you're pushing more information out, then we know from history that can disengage. If you're then adding an AI element on top of that, then you've got another layer that can cause disengagement. I think that's really important to remember. We all can spot it. When we're reading something, and we're less likely to trust it if we know it's been written by AI. So it's just something to bear in mind. But most AI rollouts start with what can the technology do, and not what is actually broken that I need to fix.
Yeah,
that's what AI is giving us, and I think it's because AI landed at a time when, I guess, at least it just kind of landed, right? It was this big AI explosion, and we're all now clamoring around trying to figure out what we can do with it. I think it's just we should remember that technology solves problems. You don't just figure out how you're going to use technology, and also the pressure to adopt isn't just coming from leadership. It comes from leadership, direct managers, but also employees themselves. Employees feel like they need to be using AI for their own career security. So leaders aren't the only ones that are chasing technology. There's like self-generated pressure, which again, kind of, if employees are adopting their own AI tools and the shadow AI, then that can cause governance problems. But it can also mean that we're also not solving the right problems as an organization. Sorry.
No, as I agree. I think the answer sits in the analysis before it starts.
100%.
Take a breath, pause, review. What are the real issues the business has? I mean, and that's why go and spend time with your stakeholders. What is the problem? Is it that you've got a retention issue? Is it that you're losing out on market share because of a particular supply chain or a particular process that is impacting customers? You needed a function to innovate differently or to think differently, to automate differently. What is it is there a reputational issue the organization is going on? How can AI, what are the things that actually need addressing that AI may or may not help solve, or may give you the time to solve if you can take some things off your plate, but they're the right things off your plate. So I think it's in that thing. And it's also as well, there is so much knowledge now in our organizations, in our brains, in our humans, in the internet, in the world. can we leverage all of that knowledge and that intelligence in a more meaningful way? The other thing I'd say as well is when you're thinking about that sort of the chasing the challenge or understanding the real issues, I think we need to look at them in the business, but we also need to look at them in the world and what's going on, because we're either in the business of helping workforces go in a direction, being brands that people want to buy from, there's a lot, or being brands that people want to work for. And I think there's also a lot of intelligence to be gained from mining together all of those customer stakeholders to find the solutions. And there's a lot of information out there that can help us understand the barriers to our business or the barriers to success, whether that's actually by doing all this, we can see that basically there's this whole perennial perception of our organization from employees that were X or from customers that were Y. So that maybe that's impacting that view. You see, I'm trying to get it going. How can it help you analyze at the start as well?
Yeah.
And I do think that, and also get ahead of what I think it's going to change us for just as human beings as well. One of the things I've been looking at just as my business as well, for example, is thinking, well, the way we create things now, or we look at things, or we judge what we trust or we don't trust, just as a human being, is much more narratively and question and answer based. We've encouraged questions. We ask questions rather than seek statements now, and we trust things on different valid things. So how are we looking at what that means for us, and how are we looking at the importance of language and psychology and how we move all through those things? So for me, it's yes, absolutely, we need to do the analysis first, ask the questions, connect the dots in the units of the business and see where they align, where they don't align, see where AI helps drive it or it doesn't, or what other things it can be used. And make sure as well we look, I say this quite a lot, don't rely on your algorithmic bubble to tell you all the world. Do your due diligence and critically think. And join
100%.
the data dots, the customer dots, the brand dots, the reputation dots, the productivity dots, the procurement dots, the system dots. Then you start to find real intelligence of what AI could solve.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's a three-stage test that I've used internally, at least, before we approve any AI initiatives in an organization. You say, what specific named problem does this solve? Who told us this problem existed? Did it come from an employer or a customer feedback or a vendor or something like that? And crucially, what does success look like in 6 months with that AI initiative in place? Because that's another thing we don't talk enough about. You might solve a problem, but what does success look like? What are you hoping to get back from it? And it's the follow-up, making sure that in 6 months or 12 months' time, you look back and say, did that solve the problem? And if it didn't, do we need to pull it out? Because otherwise you end up with AI redundant systems that are there that cost you money, but might end up with no owner. And then you've got governance problems. So I think when you put AI initiatives in place, it's monitoring those, making sure they're still relevant over time as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's the word agile, isn't it? That everyone keeps going, what does that really mean? It just means we don't wait too long and we constantly feed the intelligent circular economy of a business, and drawing those dots together and seeing how as internal communicators, how we can use it to solve it, but how if we encourage workforce adoption of AI, how that will drive that, so the narrative to those people becomes clearer.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's one little bit of research which I thought was quite pertinent to this, which was that 39% of business leaders made employees redundant as a direct result of deploying AI.
Mm-hmm.
And of those, 55% admitted they got the decision wrong. And they openly admitted that it was because it was lack of AI expertise, which is the biggest barrier to successful deployment. So they deployed something before they understood what the tool was meant to solve.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree. And the thing I would add to that as well, because I think it's such a good example as well, is that our job is not just how we help risk mitigation in an organization, it's how we help them before they make a decision. And in the decision is made, the way they convey it, the way they act on it, the way people believe in it. But because it's the decision-making process. And look, I'll say this anecdotally from the conversations I'm having in the community at the moment. Internal comms is a tough spot at the moment. It feels like we are under attack as a profession. I am hearing it. Team sizes are being cut at length. And it's really, really difficult, and it's really, really tough out there. But this is my personal, always silver lining. I do think there are things that will fundamentally change in what we do and how we do it as internal communicators, but I think it will fundamentally open up new opportunities. And I also think that organizations like Dave's example are making really short, sharp decisions without considering the long-term implications that will require course correction in the future.
Yeah, it's going back to, it's seen as a cost-cutting exercise rather than actually a generator of growth. But I think it has to be a frame of a reframing. It has to be.
Totally.
Yeah, I think there's some great insight that you've both offered there. And I'd now like to steer the conversation in a slightly different direction and talk not so much about the leaders, but a bit more about the people using it. So in our recent comms confessional, many people told us that they were using AI more than they'd like to admit. So Jen, I'll come to you first on this one. What do you feel that reveals about how people currently feel about AI? And what does it tell us about the trust and culture organizations need to build?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, I think Dave made the point earlier as well, is that if we say we're using it, does it put us at risk? Because let's face it, also in the index, restructuring and redundancy are happening at pace. So I think that we are in a better, I'm not ashamed, and more people I speak to are not ashamed of saying I use it. And I think we're all talking about use it because we no need to share it, but we're doing it in trusted spaces that don't mean that means if I show I'm using it, I'm putting myself at risk. So I think therefore it shows what is your cultural issues with that. So what you're happening is you're having tiny little microcosms of learning and siloed thinking and knowledge exchange, whereas it's not happening at a cross level. Certainly, I encourage it in my organization, and I say when I've used it, I'm seeing that more and more in trusted spaces. Psychological safety has also dropped massively this year. People do not feel safe to speak up or share without fear of negative consequence. So it comes back to a cultural issue that's the systemic issue at the heart of this. So the best thing I can always say as well is one of the techniques is to go out and observe discourse analysis. How do people talk around your business? How do we talk around here? When you listen to a group conversation, is it the manager? Do they go, it happens in two people? When they come to a meeting, they go, oh no, I did that myself. But the two people behind it are going, I did it here and that, and they're learning. That is a real barrier for the knowledge exchange and the information and that's happening in organization. I do think normalcy in using it is good. I think that some people are seeing when it's used more so. So that's people are going, oh, is that embarrassing? But people want to get better. But I think the problem is that we are not feeling psychologically safe to show how we're using it and developing it because the risk and the cultural issues that sit with that. So there is great shared thinking happening, but it's too many microcosm spaces.
I totally agree. I think too many, I've seen examples of organizations threatening consequences for like unauthorized use of AI, and it's turned into such a negative space. But that just pushes behavior further underground. People want to use it, they're not sure how to. And I think if what we need is to normalize the conversation of AI use. So leaders openly saying, here's how I use AI. Here's where I got it wrong.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm still learning about it. It kind of admitting that AI stops being a confession and becomes a normal part of how organizations kind of learn together. I think I've seen one great example of an organization running like AI show and tell sessions where anyone like junior or senior can share what they've done with AI, how it saved them time, including how it didn't and the failures, because I think that's really important to know as well, because if employees try it and they get it wrong, they might be more scared to try it again in the future. If there's a culture of you're allowed to fail, then I think that's going to only kind of bring people on more. So yeah, it's normalizing the conversation and making it okay to want to use AI. I'm glad to say that we've got a culture now that if you're not using AI, that almost you're being looked at as why aren't you? You know, we kind of, it's almost like, well, if you can use AI to speed up a task or to remove friction, then why aren't you doing that? You know, rather than why are you using AI? Like, you know, I think it has to come from the top.
Yeah.
But probably more broadly, it has to come from everybody. It just has to be a cultural shift.
It does. It's conversational, isn't it, as well? And I think it's, and there have been examples that we're seeing the phrase token maxing and I think value maxing coming out now as well in AI adoption, because we're trying to gamify it or make it target driven. So I think there was an organization that said everyone must be doing it, so they'll judge it by, I think it's a token like 100 gigabytes or something like that. A data shows you I can't remember, or bits or something. So you must have so many tokens of AI usage, and you make a leaderboard out of it. That just makes it a joke, and that makes people use it inappropriately. It's how you're using it from a conversational learning and an intelligence perspective. And I think there is probably a lot of organizations that have great knowledge in one function, and that's not being shared across another function.
I think that's also, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, imagine how powerful it could be if everyone across the whole organization, across every department, had an open conversation about, hey, we've got this tool, we think it would be great in our department. How would it help you and you and you? And then you actually broadened that conversation out of the silo and shared it. Like, how powerful could it be? I mean, there must be so many missed opportunities where we all just quietly sit within our little silos and go, I'm not going to talk too much about it over there because they might not agree with what I'm thinking over here. And
I saw a stat, 35% of employees are using their own money to pay for generative AI tools. I mean, and that's crazy, really, when you think about it. Because I think
you can see that.
Yeah.
In conversations with customers where they go, can you use this tool? We've got this great tool that you can use to help you create beautiful looking pages within your intranet. And they go, oh, but we're blocked from using that internally. And you can see, and they've seen you use it and demonstrate it, and you can see their faces light up and then they're crestfallen when they can't use it. And then these are the people that will be going, I'll just pay for my own account so I can get that. So I can do that.
Let alone departments that are probably paying for different systems. So you're talking about, if you want an efficiency game, look at actually what you're procuring and where you're spending it and deploy it appropriately. And I think that there is, and I think that one of the things that I'm hearing on the ground as well, where leaders are getting, the sort of C-suite are getting frustrated in organizations. And I think this is, again, plays down to the cultural, social time that we're in, where jobs are at risk. The narrative is everything's at risk. Everything's going. The economy isn't building. People in power aren't being trusted. The propaganda machine is all there to do it. Algorithmic bubbles, all sorts of things that are happening around us that affect our psychological makeup of things. But you've got all of this going on, and people are just not sharing across it. And it just, I think that probably one of the issues that leaders are saying is that there's sub-departments, they're leaders. So my ops leader with my people leader, with my corporate affairs leader, my IC leader, my procurement leader, what they're getting frustrated about is they're not collaborating because we're being protectionist. And that's another issue where and then that means you have strategic misalignment that comes down the organization. And therefore people don't believe it and people don't follow it.
Yeah.
Very true. So taking us on to our next question. Now, Dave, I'm going to come to you on this one. We're hearing more about agentic AI. What does that mean in practical terms for organizations? And how should HR communicators and leaders prepare their workforce for the future?
That's a good question. If I had £1 for every time I got asked what agentic means, I think I'd be a rich man. But I think the easiest way to think about what agentic AI means is if you look at what generative AI, which we all use, ChatGPT, answers a question when you ask it. Agentic AI notices something needs doing and does it across systems without waiting to be prompted. So it's the shift from responding to acting, which is really what agentic AI is. So to kind of be a bit more precise, like agentic AI refers to like systems that can understand a goal. It can plan a multi-step sequence of actions. It can execute those actions across different tools, which means connected systems as well, not just internal. And largely without human prompting, But I think it's good to understand that human in the loop can still happen within agentic AI systems. So in fact, in some respects, that it's more key because they're generally more automated and they happen behind the scenes. So yeah, that's agentic AI in a nutshell. So I think if you look at a practical example, and I always use HR because it's probably the easiest to understand, but a good example could be instead of someone in HR manually noticing that engagement scores have dropped for a team and then pulling a report together and emailing a manager, an agentic system would notice the dip in engagement. It would check to see if there's any recent context that might have played into that. And then it would automatically schedule check-ins between managers and employees. The manager would still have the final approval of whether that kind of check-in happens. It could just be that the agentic AI system would suggest that is something that should happen, and it could ask if you want to schedule the meeting. So that still needs that human in the loop to approve it. But the noticing and the action is all done by an agentic AI system.
Very well said, and I couldn't answer that question any better because Dave clearly knows far more. But the way I look at it is like agentic can become your agents and your colleagues. Generative is just an assistant to ask questions and check things. Therefore, how do you make an agent part of your team as opposed to a tool you use to check something?
I think some of them do refer to them as AI colleagues now. I think that's a term.
It's the rise of that, what you're seeing. And you're looking, if you were, and like saying, go back to the thing, take a blank piece of paper, redesign your IC function and your workflows with agents in roles, critical loops, strategic outputs, outcomes. It changes that game, doesn't it?
Definitely. But I think that's where comms professionals can change from, like what we were talking about before. You can be more strategic and you could employ AI agents to do those bits for you, to give you the information that you need to then act upon. So I think because monitoring a site for engagement drop off, I mean, how long would that take somebody to do? But that's something that for the longest time people have wanted to do. AI agents kind of allow you much more flexibility and creativity in those areas, for sure.
We've had a question come in, so I'm just going to bring that straight up on screen just as we're drawing to the end, and we've had a question just come in. So let me see if I can, where's it gone? Bring that up on stream. There we go. So this is coming, and Philip is asking both of you what your views are on calling AI agents a human name versus function agent, sort of assistant, etc. Dave, I'll come to you first on this one, if that's all right.
Yeah, we called ours Aria. I think that was at a time when we wanted to try and humanize, kind of like give a persona to the AI assistant. I think most systems are doing it now. To be honest, I don't really have a view either way right now. I could probably see both pros and cons of doing it. I think humanizing it sometimes can make it a bit friendlier and a bit less kind of like AI agent is quite a formal term. Probably less, might not understand what it necessarily means. Whereas if there's a culture of, well, go and ask Aria that, it flows more into a conversation that you can have within an organization. So I think that's why we adopted a more human name for our AI system.
Yeah, I would. I can see pros and cons. We did the same when we did do it. We called Perry was ours. So you went through that because I think that was the trend. But again, I reflected again. Was I following a trend, or did that make sense? I think it comes back. I can see pros and cons, but there's something in my instinct that says we need to be really clear about what's an AI agent and what's a human, and what the workflow is and what it works. So if you over-humanize it, then you are over-assuming that it doesn't need human in the loop. And I think that's just my warning bell in my own brain as I look at it. I think clarity of role and what it's there to do mustn't get muddled with what humans are there to do. Just my instinct right now as being through the process.
That's actually a really good point. I think we've actually had a number of people requesting that they can change the name and give it an internal persona as well. Maybe that would kind of help because that's something that you can just talk about generally, and it would be known that it would be your AI assistant internally. So yes, it's a good question. a thought-provoking one.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. Now we have come to the end of our time, so I would like to thank everybody today, particularly to Jen and Dave for joining us, and everyone who's attended today. Thank you very much for giving up your time and being part of our conversation. Very much appreciated. Just a quick reminder that the recording will be available after today's session, so do check it out. And if you've got any further questions, you know where we are and how to reach us. And so I'd just like to say thank you very much, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.